like your absolute best self is just stuck? Like your potential is trapped behind this invisible wall? Well, if so, you're definitely in the right place. The material we're covering today serves as a profound psychological wake-up call. We're going to look at exactly why we procrastinate, why we get trapped inside our own heads, and most importantly, how to actually fix it. We'll be breaking down the source psychology into clear, actionable visual steps that you can use right away.
Picture this. It's a super familiar internal monologue for a lot of us. You wake up late, grab your phone, and start scrolling. You play just one more game, watch just one more video, and tell yourself, okay, I'll start in a little bit. But you know as well as I do, that little bit never actually comes. And by the end of the day, you're lying there asking yourself this exact question: what am I doing with my life? Now, most people will just tell you this is laziness, right? They'll say you just need to manage your time better. But the source material we're digging into today reveals something completely different. This isn't laziness at all. It's actually a deep, psychological avoidance of growing up.
Okay, let's dive right into our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll diagnose the issue with the eternal child syndrome and the gifted kid trap. Then, we'll focus heavily on a highly actionable 4-step cure: escaping the cocoon, embracing the ordinary, exposure therapy, and finally, building an accountable life. Starting off with Section 1, the eternal child syndrome.
Now, a quick heads up before we really get going. The concepts we're about to unpack might sting the ego just a little bit. It can be pretty uncomfortable, but diagnosing the painful root of the issue is absolutely essential if we want to snap out of this rut. We are dealing with the concept of the puer aeternus, which is a term used by the famous psychoanalyst Carl Jung. It literally translates to the eternal boy. People in this state live what Jung called a provisional life. They basically act like spectators sitting in the stands of their own lives. They treat their job as just temporary, until their real genius is finally discovered. They treat relationships as temporary too. And they do all of this to preserve this sense of absolute freedom. But here's the catch. They're actually using freedom as a shield against ever failing or having to make a firm choice. Sure, every door stays open, but they never actually walk through any of them.
Moving right along to Section 2, the gifted kid trap.
So, where on earth does this paralyzing syndrome actually come from? To figure that out, we need to trace it back to its origins, which, surprisingly often, start with childhood praise from parents and teachers. A lot of people who struggle with the eternal child syndrome were actually really gifted kids. They learned fast, and they were labeled as special or, future geniuses. And that built their entire self-worth around untouched potential. It trapped them in this imaginary world where they're always the star, and everything is completely safe. But the second they step into harsh reality, the rules change completely. The real world doesn't care about your potential at all. It demands results. It requires serious persistence, and it forces you to accept that at the beginning, you are starting from absolute zero. And this brilliantly illustrates what's called the Icarus illusion. Just like Icarus flying way too close to the sun on wax wings because he felt completely untouchable, the eternal child confuses their untouched potential with real, actual achievement. And honestly, this is exactly why procrastination happens. Procrastination isn't just you being a couch potato, it's a highly active, totally calculated defense mechanism. As long as you delay applying for that job or writing that book or learning that new skill, you are protecting your ego. You get to keep the safe little illusion that if you did actually try, you'd obviously be the best. Now, when that gap between your fantasy and harsh reality gets a little too wide, you tend to fall into these 3 huge self-destructive traps. First up, you numb your awareness. Gaming, scrolling, toxic internet rabbit holes, they aren't just entertainment. They act as a literal psychological anesthetic to silence the alarm bells of reality ringing in your head. Second, you develop an extreme fear of long-term commitment. You find yourself pulling away the very second a relationship or project asks for real responsibility. And third, you fall into a deep victim mentality, constantly blaming your circumstances for your own lack of progress.
Let's zoom in on that victim mindset for a second. It's basically the story of Peter Pan, right? The eternal child acts exactly like Peter Pan, viewing literally any outside pressure as proof that the world is just out to get them. And who is their Captain Hook in this scenario? Well, Captain Hook represents the boss, societal rules, the bills you inevitably have to pay, and the ticking clock of time itself. The eternal child views all of these perfectly normal parts of life as unfair, evil enemies, which effectively hands over total control of their life to their circumstances.
Which brings us to Section 3, escaping the cocoon. Okay, if you saw a bit of yourself in those traps we just talked about, just take a breath.
Seriously, it's okay. We are officially pivoting away from that harsh diagnosis and moving straight into a supportive, empowering, and highly practical action plan. Because recognizing these traps isn't about beating yourself up. It's about giving yourself the power to finally change. Here are the 4 real adult actions needed to break this cycle. And remember, guilt is not going to make you grow up. Sitting around feeling terrible about your procrastination literally changes nothing. Structured, deliberate action is the only true cure here. So let's walk through these 4 steps one by one.
Step 1 is all about completely reframing how you view adulthood. The eternal child basically thinks growing up means becoming this boring, ordinary robot and completely killing off their creativity. But the exact opposite is actually true. Growing up and taking on responsibility does not kill the creative child inside you. Instead, it gives that creativity the solid, unshakable foundation and discipline it desperately needs to actually turn your ideas into reality. Without the protective walls of commitment, your brilliant ideas are just going to stay as daydreams forever.
On to Section 4, Embracing the Ordinary.
And that brings us to step 2 of our plan. We have got to confront a very specific quirk of the eternal child, the habit of looking down on normal, everyday tasks because they seem, just too small or mundane for someone with such massive potential. To fix this, I want you to try something incredibly uncomfortable. Try doing your laundry, folding it neatly, and doing the whole thing in complete and utter silence. No music playing in the background, no podcasts, no phone to distract you. Why? Because you have to force your mind down from the clouds and pull it directly back to ground-level reality. Doing boring chores with absolute total focus forces you to actively participate in the real world again.
So the absolutely crucial point here is implementing what we call grounding reality checks. Clean your own room. Pay your electric and water bills right on time. Take a normal job, yes, even a low-paying one, and just do it really well. Taking these basic, ordinary tasks seriously completely shatters your avoidance mechanism. It teaches your brain that the world doesn't just pause because you happen to feel unready today.
All right, Section 5, Exposure Therapy with Failure.
Now we have to tackle the absolute core fear of the eternal child, that deep-seated, paralyzing terror of simply not being good enough. I want you to ask yourself directly right now, what specific thing have you been avoiding simply because you're terrified you won't be amazing at it right out of the gate? Listen, the cure for this fear isn't sitting around thinking about it more. The cure is actively exposing yourself to situations where failure is genuinely, truly possible. You have to step up and shatter that illusion that you're somehow untouched by failure.
The source material calls these micro-exposures to reality, and they are total game changers. Send out your resume to 5 companies and literally risk the rejection. Take a skills course and just allow yourself to look clumsy as a total beginner. Apologize to someone you've hurt. Ask your boss for honest, unflinching feedback. A person's character is never formed by constantly winning inside their own imagination. True character is formed by falling down in real life, brushing the dust off your knees, and having the guts to keep going.
And finally, Section 6, Building an Accountable Life. We've arrived at the 4th and final step. Now, as you start actually taking these actions, you've got to realize that the child inside you is going to try and negotiate hard. It's going to look for literally any excuse to retreat right back to that soft bed and glowing phone screen. Because of that relentless internal negotiation, you simply cannot rely on your own willpower right now. You need outside structure. You need a mentor, a strict boss, or a community of highly disciplined people who are honest enough to call you out on your excuses. You need people around you who will absolutely not pamper your procrastination and who expect you to finish exactly what you started.
I want to leave you today with this incredibly powerful thought from Carl Jung. He said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents." Think about that. If you keep avoiding life and hiding behind your potential today, the real tragedy is that you'll just pass down your helplessness and your regret to the next generation. So please, don't let your life be unlived. Step out of the imaginary world, face the little scratches and bumps of reality, and finally step into the deep, incredibly rewarding waters of real life. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this gives you the structured, practical